Hello, community. Welcome to another Google Cloud Security Community Technical and Learning webinar. We're so excited to have you all here. We're so excited to have this session. A couple things. First, would love seeing more and more of you sign up for these webinars. It means to me that we are building something that you all want to hear more about, that you're excited to learn. So thank you for all that have registered and all that are attending this event. I do want to apologize in advance here. It looks like maybe I mistakenly had the times mixed up on the event in community and also then the registration form in StreamYard. So for those of you that had any complications, my sincere apologies for the mistaken communication there. But we are here now and excited to learn with you. So thank you all. We're excited that you're here to learn with us. A couple admin things before we get started. We did collect your questions during the registration process. So thank you for those that submitted your questions. We're looking to answer most of those during our webinar today. But for any questions that we don't get answered, we will go back once we post this webinar live in the Google Cloud Security community. We will answer some of them in the post there. But also feel free to ask your questions in the chat. I see a ton of you in there already, a ton of activity. It's exciting to see you all in there talking with each other, networking. Continue this process, please. Continue outside of this webinar. Come and do this in the Google Cloud community. If you haven't registered, come on over, sign up for an account, take a look at all the content we have to help you with SecOps, help you onboard, help you adopt, help you learn, make connections, network with people that are like you and using the tools like you. Ask the questions. We're here to help answer and make the most out of you using our products. So thanks again for joining this webinar. We do have special guests from Bindplane, Denton and Craig. Denton and Craig, thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us all about what we're going to be learning today and what you guys do at Bindplane, and let's go ahead and kick this thing off.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Lee. I am the principal partner engineer here over at Bindplane, and we've been working together with the Google SecOps team for about 1.5 years now, and our partnership with Google goes back even further than that. But today we'll be showing you how to gather logs from on-prem, multiple clouds, perhaps even Google applications, enrich that data, and we have a couple real-world use cases to demo for you for getting that data into Google SecOps.
Awesome. Exciting. Very exciting. Denton, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Bindplane?
Sure. Yeah. Denton Krietz, excited to be here with you all, sales engineer. And yeah, I'll be going through a couple of those use cases as well with you, showing how to use Bindplane and specifically the Bindplane gateway.
Great. Love it. Okay, Craig, it's all you guys.
All right, sounds good. I'll go ahead and kick things off here. So first slide, overall agenda, we're going to talk about Bindplane, what it is, some of the architecture and key use cases, and then we're going to dive into the actual demo. We're going to spend most of our time there showing you within the product, how do you solve some actual problems here? And then finally, we'll have some time for Q&A. So again, please go ahead and put some things in the chat if you have some live questions, or we do have some questions that were already submitted that we have some answers for. So happy to help you out there. So let's go ahead and dive in. So what is Bindplane? So Bindplane, we call it our unified telemetry pipeline. It consists of the Bindplane server itself, which can be self-hosted or SaaS, and multiple open telemetry collectors. And we'll dive into the architecture here in a second. What that enables from a key use case perspective is the ability to route data from, we call it any destination or any source to any destination. And really what is powering that is open telemetry. So within open telemetry, you have the concept of receivers where you can gather data from things such as syslog or UDP or Windows host or Kubernetes, and then the destination side, so these concept of exporters, which in our context is going to be Google SecOps, but perhaps Google Cloud Storage or even other third-party telemetry platforms, which we can support. That allows you to standardize on this open, vendor neutral type of open telemetry platform. And our head of sales has a great saying that this is the last agent you will ever need, because the open telemetry collector can collect a variety of telemetry types, metrics, logs, and traces, do all kinds of routing and filtering and parsing and enriching of data, and send those on to wherever your telemetry needs to go within the destination side, which allows us to simplify the telemetry infrastructure and the management at scale. On the management at scale side, the Bindplane server itself, you can set up configurations, and we'll do this in the demo, where you can define what data you're collecting, the filtering you're doing, the parsing, and where you're sending that data, and then take that type of configuration and move that to one system, or perhaps apply it to thousands of open telemetry collectors. So thousands of hosts can be standardized here, and that's all from within Bindplane itself. We also have a lot of features that can help at scale, things such as using the API or integrating in with a GitOps type of workflow, where the Bindplane server can help manage these type of staged rollouts, and all that can happen within Bindplane. And final thing too, I'll mention around the scale piece. We have customers in the field that have configurations with multiple thousands of open telemetry collectors associated with them. Some of our largest customers are running fleets of like 60,000 open telemetry collectors connecting back to either a Bindplane SaaS instance or a large Bindplane local cluster. So we can definitely scale up to the large enterprise. And then finally, that last piece there about reducing the overall SEM and observability cost by 40% or more. This is talking about filtering data, where we can filter things by severity, we can dedupe, we can sample. So there's several strategies that you can use within Bindplane to optimize that pipeline, because everything, typically in the modern world is based on cost of consumption. So we can help you get visibility there and to reduce the overall consumption within the pipeline. So I added this slide. I want to talk about Bindplane editions for a minute here, because this applies directly to this audience around Google. So we have a special relationship with Google that gets us, or allows us to offer, the Bindplane Google Edition. You'll see this within the documentation for either the Google Cloud Observability Suite or for SecOps, where we are the documented and supported solution for gathering data from everything outside of the Google Cloud to either Google Cloud Observability, to SecOps, and now I'll show you the demo, Google Cloud Storage. And this is available at no extra cost for all the Google customers. So you could go to our website today and sign up for either SaaS, which is frankly the easiest option to get started with, or you could also self-host, or there's even an option on the Google Cloud Marketplace. And with all three options, those are available to you underneath this Bindplane Google Edition license. And what that license gives you is the ability to collect these different telemetry signals, to enrich the data, the management at scale type of use cases that I mentioned. All of that can be handled within Bindplane Google Edition. In February, we've expanded our relationship with Google, and they have a relatively new offering for the SecOps Enterprise Plus tier. So this is your Google SecOps Enterprise Plus entitlement. Will entitle you to Bindplane Enterprise Google Edition. So what that gives you is everything with the regular Google Edition, plus the ability to mask PII data, all the data filtering, the aggregation, dedupe type of features that I had mentioned earlier on. All that can be done with Bindplane Enterprise Google Edition. And with that is designed for you to send data to a Google destination, right? So we're kind of building here from a functionality perspective. And finally, on the right-hand side, we are talking about Bindplane Enterprise. So with Bindplane Enterprise, you can transact either directly with us or via the Google Cloud Marketplace. And this will give you the ability to send data to any destination. And our licensing costs are based on the overall consumption, so the amount in, so things can be kind of sized there, and that allows you to have all the functionality that is, for example, in the Google Edition, for collecting data, the ability to mask, filter data, and everything that you need there. But this also unlocks all the additional destinations, which are great, especially for migration scenarios, or Google SecOps is running parallel with perhaps an IT operations suite that is outside the Google ecosystem. So we can support that with Bindplane Enterprise. So moving forward here, let's talk about architecture for a little bit. So this is showing our SaaS-based offering, which is Bindplane Cloud. It's an open sign-up. You're freely available to go to our website and to sign up there. And then what this looks like from a customer perspective, you'll see in the middle here, the customer network, which can be any data center. So typically that's running on Google projects, of course, and that makes a lot of sense there. But a lot of our customers are self-hosting data centers. They're running things on bare metal or VMware, or perhaps a third-party cloud. We can support any of these scenarios. And you'll have these open telemetry collectors, either the Bindplane distribution, or you can even have your own distribution of the open telemetry collector. And then these are connecting back to Bindplane Cloud. So that is over a protocol called OpAmp. So it's a TLS connection. OpAmp is part of the OpenTelemetry project. We're one of the key contributors to it. So just thought I'd mention that. And then from a data flow perspective, the only thing that is we're actually flowing from a data perspective from the collectors back to Bindplane Cloud is the management capabilities. So that is OpAmp. So that is looking at things like the agent health. But what we're not doing is we're not part of that telemetry path. So from the collectors, either to the gateway or from the actual collector directly, we send the actual telemetry to the SecOps destination. So again, customer data is not flowing through the Bindplane Cloud or the Bindplane server instance that you are hosting. That's again command and control data. So and then you'll see more within the actual demo what that looks like. But just wanted to reiterate that. Overall, our architecture is very flexible. Sometimes folks will host Bindplane gateways, perhaps in an HA configuration in an isolated network segment as they are running the Bindplane collectors in a very locked down environment. So we can support that. And then where the Bindplane gateway can be used to aggregate data within something like a DMZ. And then that will have a single outbound connection to the SecOps APIs. So we can support those kind of scenarios as well. Great. All right, I'll move forward. Stop talking about slides and start showing off the product here. But what we're going to demo, first off, I'm going to take the first two use cases. We're going to start with Windows events. I'll take you through building a basic configuration, sending data onto SecOps, and talk about some best practices and enriching the data there. And then we'll build on that with multi-destination routing with Windows events to SecOps, Google Cloud Logging, Google Cloud Storage, and talk through a few things there. And then I'll pass things over to Denton to talk about some of our newer features. Where he will set up using a Linux server as a Bindplane gateway, and again, forwarding those logs over to SecOps. So it's a best practice for us to aggregate and use a gateway. And then finally, a relatively new source for us is Windows event tracing and getting those over to SecOps. And that's especially been a pretty strong ask for us for a lot of the SecOps customers that will have a need of gathering logging, more detailed logging for things like Windows DNS analytics servers or DHCP server. So we'll be able to show that off. So what I'll do next, and bear with me 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and change what I'm sharing. Okay, let's see. Sorry, give me 1 sec here. Add to stage. And here we are. Okay, good. All right, that is working. So let me move this over here and we'll get started. So first off, just wanted to show off our demo instance of Bindplane. And this is running, you'll notice, on app.bindplane.com. So I am using our SaaS instance here. And what you see is an example with a view configuration going to a variety of Google destinations. So what we're going to do is build a basic configuration together. So I'm going to go ahead and go to configurations, and I will go ahead and create a config. So for this, I will call it Windows event demo 1, just give it a name here. And the platform that I'll select will be Windows. I do have multiple agent types. You'll notice when you go to install agents, you'll be given two options between B.version 1 or B.version 2. I would suggest, at least for the time being, you stick with B.1 because that is fully featured. B.2 is a different architecture using a supervisor, which will give us some new capabilities, especially around troubleshooting, but not all of the features are available yet for that. So stick with B.1 for now. And then I will create the destination for the Windows platform. I'll hit next, and then we'll go ahead and add some sources. So when I click on add source, we'll get the full list of our sources here. And so what we're doing and where these sources come from is this is from the upstream within the OpenTelemetry community. There are these different receivers, and we are pulling those into our distribution of the OpenTelemetry collector. And then what we're doing is we are wrapping in some smart defaults and configuration capabilities from Bindplane. So we're going to use that OpAmp connection on the OpenTelemetry collector and push that configuration down to them. So for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and go with Windows events. And you can see my default system, application, and security categories here. Those are, of course, different channels, within a Windows environment. What I'll do, specific to SecOps, though, is I will expand advanced and click raw logs. because SecOps will be doing the parsing, and we'll define that parsing here, and I'll show it in a bit. I'll note a couple other things. We can support custom channels when you're using things like Windows event forwarding, where you're forwarding Windows events from different systems to a single system where a collector may be installed. This is where you would put that custom channel, or perhaps you have an application that it has defined its own channel. You can put that here. And then finally, what I'm going to do for purposes of the demo, and it's often good to start with, is say that we're going to start reading logs from the beginning. So that way, we're going to read logs in. It's a lot more interesting as far as the demo goes. But what we're doing, and this is why I wanted to talk about this, with this offset file storage, all of our collectors and sources keep track of data that has already been sent over to SecOps. So you don't have to worry about systems or restarting a collector, for example, and then when that comes back up, resending duplicate data. We are actually tracking that within the collector itself. So I'll go ahead and hit save here, and then hit next, and then we're going to add destination. So for all the Google licenses, and you'll see a variety here because my demo environment, of course, is enterprise, but it will look something like this for those 2 Google license levels. And then we're going to go ahead and select SecOps. Now, I have some save configurations. So everything you're doing here can be saved and added to our library, where components and destination configurations can be reused. But I'll show what it looks like to create something new. So when we go to create new for SecOps, we can choose a protocol. For now, we're going to stick with the default protocol here of gRPC. And then you can define the endpoint. And if you do have a different regional endpoint outside of North America, you will need to set that here, but we can support it. And then for most customers that I've experienced, at least collecting data off of Google, you want to go with a JSON authentication type. And we actually have within our docs how to link out to and get those various credentials. So I will go back here, and I'm going to go back to my SecOps destination list, where I have a destination already configured and my credentials saved. And this is why I'm doing that bit of backtracking. And you can see from the bookmark here that is saved as part of our library. I will hit save. Great. So now we have a configuration, but it's not functional yet. So we need to add some agents to it. So one thing I'll note too, you may see the terminology either OpenTelemetry collector, or agent. Those are all referring to the same installation, the same piece of software. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Agents. And we have 3 Windows systems where I currently have OpenTelemetry collectors installed. Hit Apply. And now the configuration is saved. And the next thing I can do is start the rollout. So what this will do is it will take that op-amp connection, which is first initiated by that Windows endpoint. It's maintained, it's over TLS to the Bindplane server. And then over op-amp, we then push down the OpenTelemetry configuration, we restart the collector, and we'll iterate the configuration version. I'll show that off in a second. So what it's doing is it's gathering Windows events, sending them over to SecOps. When I click on one of our processor nodes, and either one of these can work in this context, it will make a sampling call out to one of these systems. So in this case, it's Windows App A by default. And we can expand this, and this is what is being captured. So we can see the time, observed time, severity is being set, and then the actual body. And you can tell that this is raw, because it's raw XML for this Windows event. And then this is what we're gathering. And then there's a few things that get added by default, for example, log type, and then resource and host name. So from here, everything is set, but SecOps doesn't know what to actually parse it as yet. And that's why we're going to add some things based on our recommendations for processors. So the processors are how you enrich data, you parse data, filter data, and do other functions within the telemetry pipeline itself. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is the most important, you need to do this for every single SecOps pipeline, is use a recommendation here to add log type and ingestion label to Google SecOps telemetry. So I'll view the recommendation. And this is the Google SecOps standardization processor. You can find this in a processor list. And what we're doing here is we will be defining the log type, so the parser that's going to be used on the SecOps side. So click here, and then we can define the log type. So from here, when you're first setting this up, you may not know what the log types are. You can click on supported log types, and then you will see a full list of the parsers and log types that are available within SecOps. So in this case, we're going to go with WinEVT log. This will work, by the way, for the majority of Windows events. And set this here. And because we're not setting a addition within the pipeline, it will apply to every single log. So that is a option, and I can show this off later, where you can have multiple log types within the same pipeline. But next, we'll configure the namespace. So we can say, for example, like Windows app namespace. We can set ingestion labels to add more context. So perhaps things like data center. We can add in things like the application name. We can add in customer info and hit accept. And then you'll see on the right-hand side what this change actually looks like. So I'll just go ahead and expand out one of these log entries. So log entry 170 here. And then you'll see a few attributes that are set. So Chronicle ingestion label, app, customer, and data center, Chronicle log type, and namespace are being set here. So this is what you need to do. This is your best practice as far as just a minimum to get logs flowing and being parsed correctly within SecOps. The other thing you can do, and we have another recommendation here for adding the batch processor for Google SecOps telemetry. So I'll go ahead and view this. And then what this will do is adds a batch processor within the pipeline itself. So what we'll do is we will batch up to 400 different log messages within the batch before we send it. And then the timeout is 5 seconds. So we'll send that every 5 seconds. And what this will do, especially for larger throughput type of applications, perhaps high volume syslog or a lot of Windows events, we're using batching to send these batches to the Google APIs. So therefore, we will not overwhelm them. You won't get latency and things of that nature. And we've worked with the Google product management team to optimize these. So we'll hit accept and then save. So the next thing we need to do is to roll out the configuration. But what I will do is actually I'm going to show off one other feature here. It's pretty interesting. We can change the type of rollout. If I hit start rollout now, it would automatically just push things out in sequence. So system 1, 2, and 3. I could change this to a progressive rollout, and then I could set stages. So stages based on these labels, and you can actually add different labels to different collectors. So in this case, I'm going to start with the stage and then go to production. So ENV, production, and save. So now you can see I have 2 different stages within my rollout, and then hit start rollout. And then we'll give this a couple seconds. Great. So, and then you can see that my Windows server that is tagged with stage is now running configuration version 2. And then continue rollout to prod. And then it will roll that up to prod. And then so now we can stage this out. So in this case, I have 3 different systems. Real world, it wouldn't make that much difference. We do have folks with hundreds or thousands of systems. So some of our largest customers will start things with a QA environment, and they go staging, and then go data center rollout to East Coast and West Coast, and so on. So now we've rolled this out, and everything's working here. And if you're ever interested what is being constructed, you can go to the View Configuration File button, and this will show the actual config YAML that is being pushed down over the op-amp protocol. So typically, nothing that you need to look at on a daily basis, but perhaps for troubleshooting, or if you're curious, what is being constructed here with only a few mouse clicks. All right, so that's the first use case I wanted to show off. Second use case, we're going to take Windows and go even further. So I have this set up where we're doing some interesting things. So first off, this looks a little bit different. This is our version 2 configuration, which is available today. You can go to version 1, hit the gear, and then upgrade to version 2. And then it will give you this ability to drag and drop routes and give you a little more feedback. And this is going to be our standard here very, very soon. Wanted to show this off. And what I'm doing is I'm gathering Windows events, and I'm doing some routing to multiple destinations. But first, what I'll do is I'd like to see this with some live data. So I will attach some agents to this configuration. And these are those 3 Windows systems that I built the configuration for earlier. And it's as simple as this. I'll just go ahead and click on that and then apply. And then we can roll this out to those Windows systems and start to get some live data here. So while that's happening, I'll talk through what's going on here. So first off, we have some Windows events. Like I showed you here with raw logs, and start at beginning. And then we're sending the data, and this is going live from our processor node here to this route to Google Cloud Storage. So this is a relatively new destination for us, where you can send data to a Google Cloud Storage bucket. You can, for example, define like the class of storage. And this is great. I've especially seen this used for the larger customers in the financial space, where there will be some requirements, perhaps something like within the EU, where you have to maintain that raw log for at least 7 years. So that's definitely very helpful for those kind of customers. So from the single OpenTelemetry collector, making the collection once, we can then send that route on to Google Cloud Storage directly. Right. So we have one option here. And then what I'm doing on the top side here is using a routing connector. And this is new. It's part of the version 2 routing. And I've set this to send the Windows security events to SecOps, and then the application and system logs over to our GCL Google Cloud logging destination. So we've set that here. And similar to like firewall rules, that's how we look at this. So if things match the OTTL expression, the auto expression, then it will send to that route. And then you can even have a catch-all route as well within this. So that's another option too. And this, I'm showing off logs because that's our audience here today. But we can do the same thing for metrics, logs, or traces. Then I'll hit close here. And yeah, so that's basically it. So now we're sending all that data on. And for example, you can see, I'll look at the log type here. And this is a security event. You can see Windows event security. And then that is being sent over to the SecOps destination. So great. I'll go ahead and pause there. And I think I'm going to pass things over to Denton to talk further about the use cases. But if you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer those.
Awesome.
Great stuff, Craig. Yeah, looking forward to this, Denton. And we are getting tons of questions already in there. Keep them rolling, folks. These are great questions. We will definitely get to them when we can. And thanks for answering them in the chat, Nan.
All right. Perfect. Then, yeah, I'll switch over to mine. And yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the next two things that we want to cover are collecting data from event tracing for Windows, which is a new source for us. We're really excited about it. Unlocks some functionality that people have been asking about for a while. And then talk a little bit more about how to configure Bindplane gateways and what that looks like in the environment. So similar to Craig's demo, I'm also in app.bindplane.com. So this is my SaaS demo environment. And we'll see, I've already got two collectors installed. One is running on a Windows server, and the other is running on a Debian Linux server. So we've already got those up and running just to save time during this demo. But they would be installed in the, just like we've shared in the past, super quick and easy single line installer, whether it's Linux or Windows and so forth. Cool. So let's start with the ETW side, the event tracing for Windows. So this is going to look really similar to the first pipeline that Craig built, right? We are collecting data. It's a similar but slightly different source. And then we're sending that to SecOps. So we're going to start with this configuration, and then we're going to modify it and add in the Bindplane gateway. So let's take a look at our event tracing for Windows, or Windows event trace source. All right, this is going to look pretty similar to the Windows event log source. And that's intentional. They're very similar underlying systems. And so, in the previous one, we were talking about different channels that you can subscribe to. In the ETW, we're talking about different providers that you can pull logs from. right? And as Craig mentioned, probably the biggest use case so far, and again, I expect we're going to learn about more and more over time, but the biggest so far is pulling Windows DNS server logs. So the specific provider that we care about is the Microsoft Windows DNS server. But again, there's a huge list of providers that are available. This really gets into a lower level logging and tracing functionality within Windows. So I have no doubt, like I said, that there'll be more use cases that come to light. All right. Very similar again to what Craig already showed. We're going to enable raw logs. So we're going to be sending raw XML to SecOps, which will then be able to parse this data. And everything else for now, we're going to leave as sort of the defaults, right? So I've already got this configured. I've already got it sending data to SecOps, and I've got a script running in the background that's just doing a number of DNS queries against that Windows server just to sort of generate some data. So if we go into our first processor node here, we can see a ton of DNS queries being captured, right? And again, this is raw XML, exactly what we would expect and want to send over to SecOps to then parse. All right, so these are the actual DNS queries themselves, as opposed to the admin or debug logs that were previously available, but are more sort of administrative to the DNS server as opposed to the actual queries themselves. All right, so we're pulling in a lot of data here. And then to re-emphasize one of the most important takeaways from all of this, right? We need to make sure we're setting that log type so that SecOps knows what to do with this data, how to parse this data. And just like in the previous example, we're using the Google SecOps standardization processor. And I'll show you what we've got here. So this is an interesting situation because this is all new enough that you're getting insights into things as they're still sort of in flux and in progress. And what I mean by that is the Google team is literally, as we speak, working on updating some of their parsers to better support these logs coming from Bindplane. So right now, if you want to run this today, the best log type that you can use is the Windows EVT log or Win EVT log _XML. This will parse these logs in SecOps. But we're going to have, this is going to get even better literally probably in the next couple days. The changes that are coming are going to make the Windows _DNS log type support these events. And then you'll get all of the sort of standard DNS parsing and UDM fields that you would expect. So like I said, today, if you want to run this, Win EVT log _XML is the way to go. In the very near future, and I'm sure we'll be making an announcement about this, Google will likely, there'll be some notifications there. But yeah, so some changes are coming and we're going to get even better support on the parsing side in SecOps. Cool. And just to highlight again, it's working exactly the same way. We're adding that chronicle log type attribute, Win EVT log XML. We'll hop back out. I'm sending to the same SecOps environment that Craig was. So all of the configuration there looks exactly the same as what he had described. So no real changes there. And once again, we're adding a batch processor, right? So again, these takeaways, you know, when we think about best practices when it comes to sending data to SecOps with Bindplane, ensuring that you've got the right log type enabled, ensuring that you're sending raw logs that will then be parsed by SecOps, and then taking advantage of the batch processing to make those those requests to SecOps as efficient as possible, right? Instead of sending, 1 or 2 logs at a time, we want to send batches so that we can get as much throughput through as possible. Cool. So this is an initial pipeline. Again, looks pretty similar to what Craig had already showed. But right now, this data is going directly from the Windows server that's doing the collection over to Google SecOps, right? What we want to do is add a gateway or gateways in between. This is a really common architectural configuration. It's not a requirement. Again, this works, right? This data is actively being sent to SecOps as we speak. But in a lot of cases, folks aren't going to want to have all of their, endpoint servers and so forth communicating directly with SecOps. From a networking perspective, that might not make sense. And from a credential perspective, that might not make sense, right? Do you really want your SecOps credentials loaded on all of your endpoints and servers and so forth? Even if they're securely stored, it's still not a best practice to distribute those credentials out. All right, and that those two, as well as some other use cases, are key reasons why we want to take advantage of a gateway. Right, and a gateway is really nothing more than a Bindplane collector that's collecting data from other collectors. Same software, same installation. You're still managing it in the same way within Bindplane. So if I go over to our configurations here, you'll see, again, I've already got one set up. Super simple configuration. The source is Bindplane gateway, right? So again, that's what's going to allow us to collect data from other collectors. And then in this case, the destination is going to be SecOps. Right, so this is going to act as that sort of intermediary point. Maybe this is installed in a DMZ, again, sort of making that network architecture a little more secure and controlled. Right, this happens to be rolled out to a Linux server. This could also be a Windows server. It could be Kubernetes. What have you. We just wanted to highlight, we can run on Linux just as easily as we can Windows. All right, so this guy is up and running, but it's not getting any data, right? Nothing's sending any traffic to it. So let's change that. I hop back over to our first pipeline. I'm going to add a new destination. And I'm going to select Bindplane Gateway. Right, and similar to what Craig was showing, right, I've already got this pre-configured and saved in my library, so it's really easy for me to select and find. But I'll show you what the actual configuration looks like. So let me select that, and I'm going to switch up my routing here. Right, so instead of going from my Windows event to SecOps, I'm going to go from Windows events down to my gateway. And I'm going to disconnect the SecOps configuration. Now, eventually I'll just delete this. It doesn't need to be here. But I just wanted to show how easy it is to create new pipelines, delete existing ones, things like that. All right, so let's take a quick look at the destination here. All we've got is we're sending over to the host name. In this case, it's just the local host name or the local IP address, right? Probably in most situations, that's going to be some kind of URL. Potentially, it could be a load balancer, or I'd say in most cases, it's probably going to be a load balancer with multiple gateways behind it. But for this simple setup, we're just going to hit one gateway using its local IP address. All right, it's private IP address. All right, we're going to use a gRPC protocol. There's two options, gRPC or HTTP. In most cases, either or will work very similarly. In certain situations, particular network architecture may call for one or the other. But for this demo, we're going to stick with the defaults and we're going to stick with gRPC. And we haven't done anything in advanced. There's a lot of options and functionality here. We can enable TLS. So all of this collector to collector communication can be encrypted. That is definitely common and I would say best practice. We're not in this demo, but you're literally adding server certificates and keys to the Bindplane server, or the Bindplane gateway, and then enabling TLS. And we've got all your standards, right? We can retry those connections. It has its own sending queue in case this collector is not able to reach the gateway. It can queue up data temporarily until that connection is reestablished. So again, for now, we're leaving all the defaults. Let's start this rollout. We'll give it a sec. Awesome. So again, now, instead of sending directly to SecOps, it's going to send to that Bindplane gateway. Right. So if we hop back over to our gateway config, right, and if we open this guy up, awesome. We've got data flowing. Our time is correct. So these are current logs. If I refresh, yep, we'll see this time is continuing to advance. So now we've got this guy up and running, and it's doing that final sending off to SecOps. As Craig showed, this could also be a variety of different destinations, Google Cloud Storage, Google Cloud Logging, all of that routing and work that Craig was highlighting could all be done here as well, right? So then that just means the configuration that's running on the sort of upstream collector, the initial collector, all it needs to know how to do is collect its data and ship it off to the gateway. It doesn't need to know how to filter or route any of those things. It can just stick to the basics, right? Which is another reason why people ultimately tend to use a gateway architecture. Is it's a place to offload some of that heavier filtering and processing of the data, right? So depending on the resources that are available on this sort of initial collection point, you might not want to tax that system any more than you need to, right? Doing the absolute sort of bare minimum, collect the data and ship it off. And that's great because then we can come over again to our gateway, which is purpose-built, hopefully a dedicated machine or again, multiple machines. And this is where you can do any, regex filtering that you might want to do, again, any routing and so forth. So again, it gives you that place to offload all of that additional processing that you might end up doing so that you're not taxing your initial collection points. Awesome. Great. I think those are the main things I wanted to cover. I've been seeing some questions coming in. Are there any that we want to call out? Or have we answered everything in the chat?
Yeah, I think we're on top of a lot of them there in the chat, but yeah, we'll kind of talk through a couple, kind of highlight a couple things. Adil asks, what is receiving it on the SecOps side? Is he using the forwarder or directly using the ingestion API? Short answer is you can use both options. So today, the best practice would be to send directly to the ingestion API. If you don't mind, Denton, clicking on the configuration there, we could show off the API differences.
Yep.
We do support sending to a forwarder. You do lose some fidelity, I believe, when you're going via forwarder. So the best practice would be to go via a direct path, but that is an option there. And we've seen that for some customers where they will start for their net new systems. They already have a forwarder set up and everything's working. We can work within that forwarder type of infrastructure. And then when they go to refresh, perhaps later on in the year, they can get everything set up cleanly using Bindplane gateways and just swap out really what the forwarders are doing with the Bindplane gateway. So common use case for us there.
Yep. Yeah, great call.
Yep. And then Zhao Feng writes, you mentioned that when a destination is not available, Bindplane will queue the data temporarily. What will happen if the destination is not available for a long time? Do you mind handling that one?
Yeah, definitely. So what's the way that's sort of determined currently, sort of how much or how large the queue can grow is configurable in the sending queue config here. So we've got our queue size. Again, I've left all of these as default. So the default right now is 5,000 batches of messages is the default queue size. So what we recommend is we need to have sort of a sense of the message size in general, like what is sort of our average message size, and then we can sort of work up from there. Right? We know how many we're batching, how many messages per batch we're collecting, which then lets us know sort of, okay, how large is that? And so this can be adjusted depending on how much storage you have available. The other thing I'll call out, and again, you're getting a peek into some stuff that's not fully released and yet, but it's something that we're actively working on. Is currently the sending queue is based off of local file storage, right? So each collector has its own local hard disk that it's able to queue data to, right? And that's how all of the sort of current out-of-the-box support works. But there are other storage mechanisms that are possible on the collector. Writing to more of like a centralized database or Redis server and things like that. So I suspect in the nearest future, we're going to have some more sort of flexibility around the way this works, so that it's not simply based on local storage and the size that's available there. But yeah, at the moment, the focus is really looking at the queue size, number of batches, and determining sort of how much storage you have and how many batches it can retain.
Thank you. And the other thing too I'll mention is that sometimes those sending queues will be set up on the gateway. So then the gateway systems may be set up with larger hard disks. So when it is queuing, you can use the gateway basically to queue for the entire network segment or data center. So we can help you design that.
Yep.
All right, I think we got most of the questions answered live in the chat. And there were a few questions that came over with the webinar signups. So I'll just talk through these here. First off, we got a couple questions around what are the best practices. Denton, I don't know if you have our best practices doc either pulled up or I can share my screen, but we do have a document for that.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't have it pulled up.
Okay, sure. So go ahead and add a stage here. So yeah, actually, both Denton and myself collaborated on this document, and this is kind of based on a lot of feedback from customers and common questions. But when you're starting with SecOps, this will kind of get you everything that you need to know to get started. So we talk through a little bit of information, licensing types. We talk through cloud, what type of network connections are needed, IP addresses, things of that nature, things for your allow list, and how do you sign up, what are organizations, what are projects, and then if you're going to self-host, what that looks like in the on-prem type of instance or self-hosted instance. So we have that here. We have a couple different documentation pieces with examples around HA, and especially going HA on GKE. So sometimes folks will need to self-host because they can't use SaaS for security reasons or whatever reasons you have there, but they still want to use Google to take advantage of all the different multi-region and the powerful scalability within the Google platform. So we had this guide here, and this is how I've done this with a couple larger customers, this multi-node architecture on Google Cloud, where you can follow this, use things like GKE or Cloud SQL to have a highly available multi-region based Bindplane server installation. And so that I found that to be useful for some customers. And then we talked through a high availability guide for self-hosting, gateway collectors, and really kind of how to get things set up and scale out. So yeah, definitely I would recommend looking at this. And then a couple other things too. We have this SecOps Bindplane Quick Start. And this is similar to what Den and I kind of demoed here, which is how do you get started, end to end. I actually set this up initially, this document, to be used as a kind of a training guide, getting things set up, which you could do today. Anybody on this call could sign up without any cost and just get data flowing from like a GCE VM. And this guide will show you how to do that, to get the things set up here. So those are some questions. Let me take a look at the list here. We talked about Bindplane as a gateway. There's a couple questions around Bindplane replacing the Chronicle forwarders for syslog collection. So what that'll look like is something like this. So I have a separate configuration where we're doing some syslog collection. Go to my Linux example, and you will gather logs. In this case, we're doing TCP. So you'll have a TCP port, and with the Chronicle forwarder, the way it works is you effectively have a different TCP port or UDP port listening for syslog for each log type. You can replicate a similar type of configuration within Bindplane for a single system. So in that case, what I would recommend is either a gateway or just either a standalone Linux system where you effectively swap out that Chronicle forwarder. You could have different log types set up and a different source for each log type. And you could effectively set it up where the Chronicle forwarder goes away. You set a Bindplane gateway to have that similar configuration around ports, and then you don't have to do any kind of configuration on the source side. Typically, those network environments or those network devices just send syslog. So we can replicate that kind of configuration here, where you would have multiple either TCP or UDP type of sources. So a couple of things I'll note here is that we can parse, of course, with syslog, but parsing format none, because we're setting our parsing within the pipeline here. And then in this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing that SecOps standardization processor again. And I'll show you what this looks like, where what we're doing is we're setting either NIC system or audit D. And this is a little more complicated than my initial example because we're using this OTTL expression to say, if it's a JSON log or an audit D type log, set the SecOps log type of NIC system. And we can do that here within the pipeline. So those are some kind of tips and tricks for converting away from the Chronicle forwarder. Again, looking through this here, there's one question when you are filtering data. The question is that the customer saw the regex option, but was asking if you can do multiple conditions. So yes, you can do that. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually doing some filtering around filtering by severity. You could add processors here, so you could like filter by condition or HTTP status, or you can even go custom for some of this stuff. So you could just add that in here. And I could set actually like this, and you would have a OTTL expression that is built out. And this one's custom, of course, but you could use regex here too. But what I'm showing here is you can have multiple stages of filtering within that same pipeline. And that does make a lot of sense, especially if you have a gateway that is tasked with doing the filtering for everything on that network segment. You could do all the filtering here at the gateway and not at the source side. So either option works for customers, but you can combine that within a single pipeline. Also looking through our list here, could Bindplane reduce log ingest? If so, how much? So we talk roughly around 40%. That's kind of just sort of what we've seen as far as averages go. And you actually can see that here within my pipeline. This card changes. So yeah, we are reducing because of severity filtering for some files and syslog by 59%. So you're seeing that here. What we've also seen is some extreme examples. So some logs, for example, like proxy logs or firewall logs, will have that same message that comes in over and over again, taking up the bulk of the logs. And for that, you can use the deduplication processor. And we've noticed a fairly large amount of reduction using this kind of strategy. The other strategy too that I've seen is sometimes you don't want to send every log message. You only want to send ones that are valuable from a security perspective, right? So you can filter initially here. But from the IT operations use case, kind of speaking from a customer experience, perhaps they will want to count the amount of debug logs happening. They normally don't care about debug messages, but they would be interested to know if those are trending upward. So what we did with the customer is we had a count telemetry processor configuration where we were taking things by severity, counting the number of debug messages, and then sending that on as a time series metric to Google Cloud Observability, the Google Cloud monitoring side. So in that case, we are reducing the overall payload by 90+% because we're just sending the count of the telemetry, and then that will give a signal for any kind of potential trends or issues within their infrastructure. And that's what we've done for some customers. So yeah, benchmark is usually around 40% for filtering, but there's definitely some strategies that you can use to go even further. So
Cool.
only
Hey, real quick, Craig, I wanted
Sure.
to comment on Binu's question here in the chat. It's really interesting. It got me thinking around prioritizing logs. And only collecting syslog in the case of an outage and so forth. So the short answer is there's not an out of the box sort of functionality to do that. So there's logs aren't sort of prioritized in that way. But I've been trying to think. So one thing to call out, and I would bucket this in that sort of best practices bucket, is our collectors emit a significant amount of internal telemetry, logs and metrics about how it's functioning. And a lot of that telemetry is exposed in the UI. You'll see throughput numbers and things like that. But there's also some of that data that is not currently exposed in the Bindplane UI, but can be collected into other systems. So, observability platforms and things like that. So Google metrics. Exactly. So Craig is showing how you would collect the collector's own metrics and you can ship that off. So I think there could be some interesting ways to create some automation around this, right? If you can collect the metrics around queue size. You can have that in some downstream system. And that could even possibly kick off some kind of mechanism that updates the configuration, right? Pauses certain sources. So it's a great question. And I think there's probably some really interesting opportunities there using the collector's own metrics and some of the APIs and other functionality that's built into Bindplane to make that happen. So yeah, thanks for the question, and gives us something to think about how to improve that. So
Awesome, thank you. Somewhat related to, I'll mention there is a Bindplane agent log source, and there is a parser within SecOps, so you can actually send the agent's own logs over to SecOps, and that is available today. Josiah writes, does SaaS support private links, or is self-hosted the only move for that use case? Today, I would recommend self-hosting. We have the ability for you to build your own type of configuration from the VM side, or we do have a Google Marketplace listing that's a VM appliance. It's already set up for you. So both of those are solid options there. We have talked about kind of a special SaaS setup where we effectively host a dedicated instance for larger customers. So perhaps if you want to talk to me later about that, we could talk about what your use case looks like there. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and pause there because it looks like we have 2 minutes left, and I'll pass things over to you, Matt.
Yeah, this has been really great, Denton, Craig. Thank you so much for showing off your expertise and the tricks and the tips using Bindplane and SecOps. The entire audience, thank you for all your questions and your engagement, and for continuing to leverage Bindplane and SecOps. Hopefully, this was valuable for you all, and that you learned something today, and you can take it back and amplify how you're using our tools, how you're using Bindplane We will post and host this in community, probably looking at next week. I'm at a conference this week, so if I look like I'm tired, that's because I'm in Vegas right now, and I am a little bit. But thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for your patience on getting this over to community. I saw the comments here. We will make sure that we have this up and live soon. And if you have additional questions while you're reviewing the content, please ask them in this forum, in the community forum. Craig and Denton and the team and our subject matter experts will be monitoring your questions so that we can answer them appropriately and make sure that you use this the best possible way that you can. Thanks again, Craig. Thanks again, Denton. Really appreciate the partnership here. And thank you all that attended. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.